Baruch Hashem, this week in our Rashi studies, yesterday we discussed about the psukim that talk about vidoy meiser, which is the concept of confession over tithes, and people had a little bit of a issue understanding it. So I want to take a couple of minutes and go over that, and then after we go over the mitzvah of vidoy meiser, the confession over tithes, then we'll move on to the next topic in the parasha, which is the idea of writing the Torah on 12 stones. So first thing I'd like to talk about is, what is this confession over tithe? So let's first read the psukim, and after we read the psukim, I'll explain the halachos about it. Then we'll do the Talmudic texts on it, and then we'll go from there. So in chapter 26, it's contained in chapter 26, verse 12, 13, 14, basically only 3 psukim. Or really maybe also 15, although it's not 100% clear to me that 15 is part of it as well. But we'll read it too, to be sure. So let's just read these 4 psukim, chapter 26, verses 12 through 15. So Torah tells us, Ki sechalel aser eskol ma'asar tuascha. Also, by the way, Monday, I already know that I have a bris to attend at the same time as this year, so we won't be able to meet. So Ki sechalel aser eskol ma'asar tuascha. When you finish tithing all your crops in the 3rd year, Shnat HaMa'aser. And you give them to the Levite, the convert, the orphan, the widow, and they eat them in your gates, and they're satisfied. First of all, this is what's called the completion of the tithes in the 3rd year. What are we talking about with the tithes? So let me just say the background here, that there's the Jewish calendar is divided into different ways, but one of the main ways is divided into 7-year cycles. This 7-year cycle, the 7th year is the Shemitah year, sabbatical year. But the first 6 years, we have a series of tithes which we're supposed to give every single year. And then there are some which are only given not every year, but on different years of the cycle. So the first tithe that we have to give is the truma. That's the offering to the Kohen. Also, we give the bikurim, the first fruits, to the Kohen. That's the beginning of our parsha. Then, in addition to that, we give the meiser, which is to the Levites. So that's given every year of the 6-year cycle. Then, in addition to that, there's what's called a meiser sheni. This is a secondary tithe, which is the tithe that's taken up, that you take the produce and you take it up to Jerusalem to eat it. That's done in the 1st, 2nd, and the 4th and the 5th years of the cycle. But in the 3rd and the 6th years of the cycle, you don't do what's called the meiser sheni. Instead, you do the meiser ani. You give the tithe to the poor. You give the tithe to the poor. So when you have finished tithing all the crops in the 3rd year, Rashi says it's not the 3rd year, it's really the 4th year. But it means after 3 years, in the 4th year before Pesach, meaning to say that a person is supposed to have finished his tithing, all the tithes from his house. He's not allowed to keep the tithes in his house. He has to have paid his tithes, so to speak, like having paid his taxes. Meaning, so you can't keep any of the tithes in your house when it comes to the 4th year of the cycle on the eve of Pesach. You have to get rid of all the tithes from your house. And when you get rid of all the tithes of your house and you've given them out to the people they're supposed to get them, then you have to say this formulaic expression, which is called vidoy meiser, the confession over the tithes. And that's the statement. And the rabbis call it a vidoy meiser. That's why the Gemara in Sota calls it vidoy meiser. And why is it called vidoy? Usually means a confession. Starting this Motzei Shabbos, by the way, we have a Geshmak Shabbos here We have 30 boys coming in to spend Shabbos with us in the yeshiva, and Motzi Shabbos is going to be slichos. We have a slichos, beautiful slichos led by our son Shia, and that's when we started to say vidoy. We started to say vidoy on Saturday night. Vidoy is usually a confession, but here vidoy means the opposite. Here you're saying vidoy, you're saying I did everything right. So why is it called vidoy here? There's several explanations to that, why it's called vidoy. Possibly it's not a confession. Possibly the word vidoy here means hoda'ah. It's like an admission that I've done everything correctly. Another possibility is it's called a confession because when you list what you've done, accurately, you're almost, so to speak, noticing that you're not as great as you think you are. You're listing all your accomplishments. Like if you have to make a resume and you realize, whoa, that's all I did. So that's what that's what it is. The Vidoy Meister is saying, this is what I've accomplished. I didn't accomplish everything I thought I'd do, but this I did accomplish. So now this is what this confessional statement is supposed to be. You shall say before Hashem your God, this is the formulaic statement we have to say before the fourth year before Pesach. We say, I've gotten rid of all these sacred things from my house, all these items which we were supposed to give us a tithe, they're no longer in my house. I got rid of them. I gave them away to the stranger, the Levite, the orphan, the widow. I did everything that you commanded me. I did not violate your commandments. I did not forget them. I did not eat them in my state of mourning. By the way, where's the first time Oni appears in the Bible? It's by Benjamin. He's called the son of my Ben Oni. And so I didn't eat them in my distress or in my mourning. What's the problem with that? We'll see what the problem is. And I did not eat them while I was tameh. Meaning to say, if I was tameh and the food was tahor, if the food was tameh and I was tahor, I did not eat them. And I did not give them for the use of the dead. I listened to everything that God told me to do. I did everything that I was commanded. So you can see why the commentaries wonder, why is this called a confession? It's not a confession, it's more, look how much I did. But okay, we tried to address that question before. And then he says, gaze down from your holy abode, God, from the heavens, Israel, bless the people of Israel. The earth that you gave us, like you swore to our forefathers, the land flowing with milk and honey. So this is what's called the Vidoy Meiser, the confession that you have, in fact, given your tithes, and therefore you ask God to bless us. That's the statement. So before we go to some of the Hasidic commentary on it, let us first look at the Talmudic text. The Talmudic text is states, V'amarta, so you shall say on this day. So says the Gemara Megillah that Gemara says, Kol hayom kasher l'vidoy meiser. You could say it. This confessional prayer can be said the entire day. It doesn't have to be said in the morning, but it has to be said during the day. You have to say it during the day. You have all day on the eve of Pesach of the fourth year to say it. Bi'arti HaKodesh, I got rid of this sacred food from my house. This is a reference to Meiser Sheni and Net Haravai. And Meiser Sheni is the secondary tithe, which you have to eat in Jerusalem. Say, I'm not keeping in my house anymore. Net Haravai, these are the crops of the fourth year after you planted a tree. That also you have to eat in Jerusalem. You have to bring them to Jerusalem. I gave them to the Levi. That's the Meiser Levi, the Levitical tithe. And I also gave it, that refers to the Truma, the gift to the Kohen, and the Trumas Meiser. That's the gift that the Levite has to give to the Kohen. Okay. to the converts, the orphan, the widow. This refers to the Meiser Ani. These are poor people, and these are the tithe they have to give to the poor. This is referring to the tithe also of leket shechav, the gleanings, and mirabayis. That refers to challah. That refers to the portion of the dough that you're supposed to give to the kohen. Now we go to the idea that it says, well, Bi'arti HaKodesh, I got rid of the holy things from my house. And also it says in this context that I did not eat them while I was in a state of mourning. That state of mourning is called onain, that after Rahman al somebody suffers a loss, that you don't do positive commandments until such time as the body is buried. But in addition to that, we're learning from here that the bikurim, these first fruits, are prohibited for the onain. The onain is not allowed to eat them. And what's the reasoning? So it's the bikurim are an expression of joy, and so therefore, if a person is eating them while he's in aninut, these are conflicting things. And I want to focus on. So the bikurim is prohibited to the onain because the verse is be'arti HaKodesh. The Kodesh implies elyon b'mashma, meaning to say the following. Well, we'll see what happens. But first, be'arti HaKodesh. Chad bar nash have a mapik maser osav ketikunan. The Jerusalem Talmud tells us the following story: that there was a person who was always separating his tithes properly. Came a time and the rabbis were requesting praying for him. So says Amrei Rebbe Menelu Gavra. So he says, where is this man? He said, get up, and he said, I have got rid of the Kodesh from the house. Meaning to say, what is the story? The story is as follows: that there was an incident in those days that it hadn't rained for a long period of time. And the sages were working hard and praying and requesting mercy from God that it should rain. And Rabbi Mana found a man that was very careful in the laws of tithing. And he said, the Amaron, he said to him that this man should make a prayer for the tithe. Meaning to say that this person who was so careful about the tithing, Rabbi Mana requested from him that he make a prayer to God, and he should request mercy from God. Meaning to say that he should say this exact paragraph that we just read. He should say this paragraph, that it says in it, Hashkifa mimon kachcha, gaze down from your abode in heaven and bless your people. Meaning to say, because this person was so careful with tithing, this prayer should be that God would listen to his prayer. And so that was what he requested. He said, so that's how we understand this story. This is the same. So since this person was very careful in this one mitzvah, there is another statement of Rabbi Mana where he says, whoever does a mitzvah exactly the way God says it, then even if God has made a decree, he's going to cancel it because this person is so careful with that mitzvah. And so therefore, this person was so careful with the mitzvah of tithing that as a consequence, he had the ability to cancel this decree from heaven. And this prayer specifically about the tithing is also connected to the coming down of rain, because it says in the Mishnah it says in the Mishnah that it says Hashkifa Barechas Adama. It refers to Tavo Matar. So basically, that's the idea here, that specifically, if we wanted it to rain, the rabbis turned to the person who was absolutely careful with the mitzvah of tithing. Now, the mitzvah of tithing, let me just pause for a moment. Is it a mitzvah to give specifically 10%? So I saw an article about this from Rabbi Daniel Z. Feldman. that this concept of giving 10% of your money to charity. Obviously, you have to give some. We all have to give some of our money to charity, but do we have to specifically give 10%? So about this, I saw an article by Rabbi Daniel Z. Feldman. Let me pull up the quote. Hold on one second. He quoted, I've heard Rav Schachter say a few times that it's not required, it's a custom, but here he said, here he says the following. Hold on one second. The Nodel Beyehuda was asked about the idea of whether or not you have to give 10% to charity. That's this idea of vidoy meiser in general. And he said, I have no comfort discussing an issue which has no foundation in the Talmud. For the Talmud is the source from which to draw proofs, and a matter with no source cannot have logic with a foundation, but only instinctual reasoning. So basically, the Noda B'Yehuda refused to address the issue of whether a person specifically has to give 10%. The reason why Rabbi Feldman was writing about this article, why he quoted that Noda B'Yehuda, was because Rabbi Feldman, because there was a terrible thing that happened. This was an article that was in the JTA that they wrote an article about the fact that the synagogue where I used to be the rabbi of, assistant rabbi of Hebrew Institute of Riverdale, there was something very bad happened. They dropped the Torah scroll. And so the rabbi there said they don't need to fast. So Rabbi Feldman said, it's true that it's not in the Talmud that you need to fast, but he did bring down many sources, and he said there are many laws that even though they're not in the Talmud, they have the force of it has the force of law today, or maybe it's appropriate to do it. So anyway, he went into a discussion of whether or not that opinion that one does not need to fast when the Torah was, God forbid, hits the ground, whether that's something that's a correct ruling or whether he's sympathetic to it. Anyway, that was the question, and that's what Rabbi Feldman said. I don't know if anybody here has ever seen, God forbid, the Torah drop, but if you did, you should definitely read this article by Rabbi Feldman. Anyway, okay, so that was the Aratim Kodesh Minabayis. I did all the commandments that you commanded me, and this tells us that you need to tithe in order. And what does it mean, Asher Tivisani, that you commanded me? This is a very powerful idea. He says that the Sifri says that I did not give it to anybody who's inappropriate. It's our responsibility when we give out the tithes to make sure that they're going to the right person. I did not violate your commands, meaning to say, I did not, that it's a very, very important halacha that when you separate the tithes, it only works if you separate in the proper manner. You can't separate on something that's detached and use it with something that's attached to the ground. Or you can't do it on something new, on something old. Meaning to say it has to be separated, the 10% or whatever percent, from a very similar item, either both new or both old, and both have to be detached from the ground. Lo shachachti, and what does this mean? I did not forget. Says the Mishnah, Lo shachachti milavarech u'milahaskir shem chalav. I did not forget to recite, to bless you, and to mention your name when I was separating these tithes. That I said the blessing, Asher Kadishanu Mitosav Tzivanu, Mahafresh Trumos and Maestros. I said the blessing of separating Truma and Maestros. And now this is a rabbinic blessing, but nevertheless, Shachachti here, the rabbis find proof for it or a source for it from this concept, from the verse. It says, I did not forget to bless. Meaning to say that when we give these tithes, we're supposed to make a bracha. Rabbinically speaking, we're supposed to make a bracha. This is a very important point also. That the person who gives, it's not enough to give charity. Not enough to give the tithe to the Kohen, to the Levites, to the poor. That's not enough. We also have to make the bracha when we give. We have to thank Hashem for giving us the opportunity to give. It's a very bad thing if somebody gives. I mean, I've been in Jewish institutions working as a rabbi now for over 30 years, almost 30 years. And I've seen a lot of different people give. A lot of people give beautifully. Once in a while, there's somebody who unfortunately doesn't know how to give, doesn't realize that to give is a blessing. And they'll give money, and they'll give charity to the synagogue, let's say, but they'll do it in a way which really takes away from their mitzvah because they didn't give properly. And that's a terrible, terrible thing. So this is the phrase that you need to remind them of when it's the appropriate time, not in Mishas Maisa, not in the middle of things, but at the appropriate time, say, Now, when I gave the tithe, I didn't forget to bless you and to mention your name. That it's a mitzvah to give and to say the blessing when you give. So, okay. Nasati mimenu ames. I did not give it to a dead body. So the Jerusalem Talmud discusses this. What does it mean I did not give it to a dead body? What is this referring to, says the Jerusalem Talmud? If it's meaning to say I gave it to him for an ark or shrouds, that would be prohibited. Even for a living person, you can't give them the tithes to be used for an ark or shroud. So for sure for a dead. So it's for something that would be permitted for a living and prohibited for the dead. What is that? Anointing. I mean to say you didn't use these tithing, let's say this olive oil, to smear on the dead body. So that's the concept. That's the concept here. And then just on the last verse before we go to the Hasidic interpretations of this verse, Hashkifa, look down from heaven, says the Sifri, since we did what was decreed upon us, therefore you God have to do what you promised to us, Hashkifa. So that's the concept. The Jerusalem Talmud says, Ad Hashkifa, when you're reading this passage, you have to read it in a soft voice, in a low voice. But when you get to Hashkifa, you have to read it in an extra loud voice. Meaning to say, what's the reason why we're supposed to read these verses of the Vidoy Meiser in a low voice? It's an astonishing halacha. What's the reason? The reason is because, says the Torah Tamima, because in later days, there were unfortunately too many people that were not careful about the mitzvah of tithing. And so therefore the sages didn't want them to say explicitly out loud this passage of Vidoy Meiser because we can't say it anymore. I did everything that you commanded me. And so therefore we don't want like somebody, let's say it was the Torah reader. Let's say the Torah reader was a stingy guy and he gets up there and he's reading and he says, I did everything you commanded me. And people will be like, no, you didn't. You're a stingy person. So the sages instituted that we should recite this whole passage of Vidoy softly. And then we won't know who said it or not. And only the verse at the end of it, which is, God, you gaze down and look at us. That's the only one that's the only one that we're supposed to read out loud. Okay, so these are the literal words of the verse, and now I'd like to look for a few moments at the Hasidic explanations. Hold on one second. First of all, let me see if anybody has any questions about this. Any questions? Happy to address them. No questions. Okay. our typical questioners have gone away this week, so no questions from them this week either. I just want, before we get to the Hasidic explanation, I would like to just share the Baal HaTurim. Baal HaTurim says, Lo avarti mitzvah natati, and I did not give it, Lo natati mimenu ames, I've not given it to the dead. This phrase, the Baal HaTurim says that this phrase, Lo natati mimenu ames, appears, I did not give it to the dead, appears only twice in the entire Bible. Velo natati, this phrase, I have not given it here, and also I have not given lo natati lachato chiki. Chiki is my palate, meaning to say I have not given my palate to sin, meaning to say I have not sinned with regard to this. Lameis, this word lameis, also for a dead body, also only appears twice in the Bible. It appears here, and it says, "Do not cry for the dead, al tenudulo." Do not lament for him. And so therefore, what he's saying is the Baal HaTurim connects it, because here it says, I've not given to the dead. And elsewhere, this expression, lameis, only appears, do not cry, lameis, for the dead body. It means you haven't used this money to cover the funeral expenses. They used to hire professional criers and professional weepers, and you didn't pay for that. There is a custom when writing the word hashkifa to look down. There is a custom to put full tagin crowns on the kuf of hashkifa. The Baal HaTurim records that, and the reason is because our request is being made in the merit of Avram, and Avram was 100 years old when he gave birth to Yitzchak. Okay, fine. So these are this is the Baal HaTurim's explanation, and now we go to the Hasidic commentaries on these phrases. Bi'arti HaKodesh min habayis, I've gotten rid of the Kodesh from the house, and Lo avarti mitzosecha v'lo shachachti, I did not violate your commandments, I did not forget. I did everything that you commanded me. Okay, so let's see what the Rebbe say here. First of all, we have the explanation of the Radomsker. The Radomsker Rebbe, known as the Tiferes Shlomo. The Radomsker is the one who sent everybody to Rebbe Elimelech's grave. He said that if you go to Rebbe Elimelech's grave on his yortzeit, you're guaranteed to go to heaven. This year, I want to go to Rebbe Elimelech's grave for his yortzeit, but also for the Shabbos beforehand. Anyway, it says in the pasuk, you give it to the Levite, the ger, the widow, the orphan, and you eat in your gates, and you are satisfied. He says here in the Tiferes Shlomo, the Torah added on the words, and they will be satisfied. It could have just said you should give it to the poor, and they will eat it. Why does it say they'll be satisfied? This goes back to the idea of what I was saying before. It teaches us that a person needs to give ba'ayin yafa. A person needs to give generously. That if you give stingily, or if you give begrudgingly, you give with a tight manner, then the blessing will not descend upon it. So if we want the blessing to descend upon what we have to give with a generous spirit. And you say before God, I've gotten rid of the Kodesh, I got rid of the holy things from my house, I gave them to the Levites, the Ger, the Yasam, the Amana, like everything you commanded me, I have not violated, and I have not forgotten. What does it mean, Bi'arti HaKodesh min habayis? I got rid of the Kodesh from the house. Yivarti es HaKedusha min habayis. Mi'amitzvah she'asiti bebeiti. V'at HaKodesh mitlakeach v'gadal mikoach hamitzvos she'nasim bebeit Yisrael. This is from the Radomsker. What does it mean? Hivarti HaKedusha. I kindled. So the Radomsker says a beautiful explanation here. He changes the whole meaning of the words to give us such a powerful explanation. He says, don't read it as I got rid of the Kodesh from the house. Now, the literal context, the literal meaning of the word that I got rid of the Kodesh from the house means that all these tithes, which are supposed to be given, I got rid of them. I did what I was supposed to. But the Radomsker takes it the opposite way. He says, don't read it as biarti, but he adds on a letter before the bet saying, hiv arti et hakadusha. I lit the fire of holiness from the house, from the mitzvos that I did in the house. The fiery blade grew and grew from the strength of the mitzvos that are done in the house of Israel. Meaning to say, I did all the mitzvos in my house, and that causes tremendous holiness to grow. We did this in the Daf Yomi this morning. We saw a similar idea. The Daf Yomi says that the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, is supposed to be a Kohen Agadol Me'achav. He's supposed to be greater than his brothers in beauty, in wisdom, in koach, in strength, and in wealth. So Rabbi Chaim Shmulevitz asked the question, what do you mean he has to be stronger, but koach? Why does the Kohen Gadol have to be greater in strength? What is the meaning of that? So Rabbi Chaim Shmulevitz explains it doesn't mean physical strength. It means with passion and energy, that the Kohen Gadol is supposed to be leading Am Yisrael with a tremendous passion, with tremendous energy. And that's the concept here, that the Kohen Gadol has the greatest koach, the greatest commitment and energy and focus on serving Hashem. And so that's what the Tfer Shlomo is saying here. He says that if we do the mitzvos in our house, we're going to light the flame of, we're going to cause the flame of holiness to go up from the house. Wow, I just saw something else here. There's a powerful phrase it says, Biarti HaKodesh min habayis. So some read this as a terrible thing that happened. What happened was that there was one person who was very poor, and he had to make a living, so he sold his holy writing called the Zohar. And that night he had a dream that says, Biarti HaKodesh min habayis, Rashi Tavos of behemoth, animal, meaning to say you sold the holy writings for this animalistic purpose. That's also like a Torah scroll. A person is not supposed to sell it unless there's extreme circumstances. You're not supposed to sell your Torah scroll unless it's to get married. You don't have enough money to get married. Then you're allowed to do it. But generally speaking, you're not allowed to sell it. Okay. Well, I did not violate your commandments, and I did not forget. So what does that mean? Says this Sfas Emes, I don't understand. Why does it have to say both? It says, I did not violate your commandments, and I did not forget them. So if you fulfill the commandments, Mamela, you're not forgetting it. You're obviously not forgetting it if you fulfilled it. So must be, says the Sfas Emes, but that's actually not true. It's actually not true. It's possible, this is also a very powerful idea, it's possible that a person forgets a mitzvah, even though according to the appearance of the eye, he's fulfilling it. Yeah, and what does that mean? Let's say you just did the mitzvah out of rote. You did it without any kavanah, without any intent, and you did it just like out of, like rote, like you said the prayers, just without focusing on them. And so muscle memory. And so such a circumstance is while you're thinking about other things. So therefore, you're saying, I didn't violate your mitzvah, and then lo shachachti, I didn't forget, I had the proper kavanah. I didn't just do it out of rote or muscle memory. I fulfilled the mitzvah, and I did it with proper intent for the purpose of God. That's what the Sfas Emes says. Comes along the Sakat Shavar, the Avnei Nezer. He says, what does it mean? Well, Avarti, he quotes the Mishnah that we cited earlier, that he says, I did not forget to make a blessing to you. But the question is, how could the Mishnah say that this is referring to a blessing All the blessings, with the exception of possibly two, are rabbinic. So how can we say that this is referring to a blessing when the blessings are rabbinic? So I quoted earlier the position of the Torah Tamima, which says that this is a reference to the mitzvah of Truma and Meiser, that you're supposed to make a blessing when you separate those tithes. But the Sakhachover quotes the position of the Rimagash. The Rimagash was the teacher of the father of Maimonides. So he was Maimon's teacher, Maimon's teacher, and he says that this is actually a reference to the blessing of Shechianu. And he says this idea, this blessing of Shechianu, thanking you, God, for bringing me to this moment, is actually biblical. Biblical. Why? Because how can we say the blessing of Shechianu is biblical? Because the explanation is that the main mitzvah is to be alive and to be rejoicing and to have a desire to do a mitzvah. And that you do the mitzvah from the depths of the heart. And so therefore a person is begging, when will come this moment to fulfill this mitzvah, not fulfill it? And then it says, Rashi says, when the Jewish people wake up from their mourning, they wake up like a lion, they run to grab the mitzvahs. And that shows just how much you're desiring to do the mitzvah. And so blessing of Shechianu is biblical because it's the desire to do mitzvahs. It's the love for the mitzvahs. It's the running to do the mitzvahs. And so that's what you're saying is, Lo shachachti, I did not forget to make the blessing of Shechianu, that I have this moment that I'm alive and I'm running to do the mitzvahs. You didn't take that out of your lexicon. You desire deeply to run to do that mitzvah. So now we see that there are three blessings that are biblical. Three blessings are the Birkat HaMazon, and then the blessing over Torah. And now we have this other mitzvah that the blessing of Shechianu, according to the Sakhachover Rebbe, is a biblical commandment. Okay, so now there's another story about this. I didn't tell you the story, but this is a story that appears in the Midrash, the Midrash Rabbah. There was an incident with Reb Pinchas ben Yair, who went to a city, and the mice in that city were eating everything up inside the city. And they made a request from Reb Pinchas ben Yair. They said, and they wanted him to pray for them, get rid of these animals. He said, this is what he said. He said, if you separate your tithes properly, then I promise you the mice will no longer eat from it. And we're going to get, actually, we're studying the tractate Harios, and tonight we're going to do page 10. So, God willing, on Sunday, hold on. Tomorrow is 10. That's Thursday. Friday is 11. Saturday 12. And Sunday is 13. So this is the Daf Yomi for Slichos, the first night of Slichos. It says in the Gemara in Horios, Ochal mimasha ochal achbar. If you eat from something which a mouse has already eaten from, that will cause you to forget your learning. So therefore, the person who separates the tithes has to say, I did not violate your mitzvos, meaning to say, I separated properly, and so therefore I didn't forget my learning because I did not eat from that which the mouse ate. This is basically, if you separate your tithes, then the mice won't eat it, and then you could say that you did not forget your study. I did not eat it while I was in a state of mourning. What does that mean? I did not eat in a state of mourning. So the Rambam writes, what does this mean? This is a beautiful idea. One of the most important ideas in the Rambam. It comes from those who attend Rabbi Shaul's class on Wednesday nights. This is actually from Rav Shaul's great grandfather, the Mozartzer Rebbe. So he says like this. He says, "Hakavana." The intent, what does it mean I did not eat from these fruits in a state of oni, in a state of morning. It means, according to what the Rambam says, when a person eats and drinks on Yom Tov, he has to make sure he shouldn't close his doors and his windows and just eat by himself with his family. He has to make sure that he also gives food to the widow, the orphans, the strangers, and to feed them with the other poor people. But somebody who closes his doors to his courtyard and eats and drinks just with his children and his immediate members of his household and his wife, he's not, and he doesn't give at all to the poor people or to the bitter souls. This is not, says the Rambam, this is not rejoicing of the mitzvah. On Yom Tif, that is just rejoicing of his belly. And about them it says, Zivchayam kulachem onim. It says all your bread is onim. It means to say all your bread is like the food of an onain, like the onain eats by himself without friendship. And so that's what the onim means. And so this is what Divrei Shaul says. When you say lo achalti va'oni, means to say I didn't eat by myself with my door closed to the poor people, but rather I shared all my food. I was a part of the society, and I didn't shut myself off from society. Well, Chalti only doesn't mean like we read in the commentary of Rashi, I didn't eat it while I was in a state of mourning, but rather it means I didn't eat it by myself, like an onain who only eats by himself. That's the teaching of the Divrei Shaul. Okay, asiti kechol asher tzivitani. I did everything that you commanded. Rashi says here, I didn't quote the Rashi. Rashi says, asiti kechol asher tzivitani. Rashi quotes here, samachti, I rejoice, visimachti bo, and I caused others to rejoice with it. I rejoiced and I caused others to rejoice with it. Let's see what that means. Says the Mikra Mefurash. He says such a beautiful idea here. What does it mean? He says here, Kol Torah Kua, the entire Torah is included within the commandment of love your neighbor like you love yourself. And because this person who separated his tithes caused others to be happy, he's fulfilled the mitzvah of ahavto reach kamocha, love your neighbor like you love yourself, because he caused them to be happy. And therefore it says, I did everything that you commanded me, because everything includes the mitzvah of the whole Torah, because by making this person, by expressing in kindness to him, you basically have done the essence of the Torah. Okay, what do we do about the pasuk we just said? Hashkifa mimaon kachacha, gaze down from your abode in heaven and bless your people of Israel and the land that you gave to us, just like you swore to our forefathers, the land flowing with milk and honey. Comes along the Kotzker Rebbe. The Kotzker Rebbe says, quotes the Rashi that we said before. We did what you decreed upon us. Now you do, God, you have to do your job and do what you're supposed to do. So first of all, says the Kotzker, why does Rashi call this? Why does Rashi say we did that which you decreed upon us? Asinu mashikazartalenu. We did that which you decreed upon us. The word gezerah here is a very harsh command. Why is the word gezerah being used here? And so rather we say, says the Kotzker, Ella kum ein zu gzera kasha letzavot al ishmei Yisrael and more. Asiti k'cho asher tivani. He says, what kind of decree? It's impossible. This is it's not a decree from God that we have to say to everybody that we have to claim we kept the whole Torah. Who would be ever possible to say nobody would ever be possible to say it. So rather we have to say it's our responsibility to say say that and fulfill your words. This is why it's called a decree. It's called a decree because how else are we supposed to say that? So there's, one last source. This is what Rabbi Yosef was referring to yesterday, that it says all the Ashkifos, Rabbi Goldman, when we studied yesterday, quoted the Rashi from Vayera from Stone, that all the gazings in the Torah are bad, except for this gazing where God comes down from heaven. And the power of this is that so great is the charity, the gift of charity to the poor, because it turns the harsh decree of the gazing into a positive. And that's what the Zohar says. This is what the Isha Shunamit said to Elisha. She said to Elisha, I'm dwelling amongst my people, because she didn't want to take herself out of the community, because then she would be judged by herself. And that's worse than being judged with everybody. And so therefore, when Hashem looks at man, the individual, to judge him, that will be bad. But here it says, when it's the confessional tithe, that a person's giving his gifts to others and he is nullifying himself to the community, then God judges him with everything. Meaning to say, why is this the only time in the Torah where looking is positive? Because this is coming right after we gave charity. And whenever we give charity, we're no longer being judged as individuals, but we're being judged as part of the community. And that's the concept here. That's the concept here. And that's why every Ashkifa is bad in Torah except for this one, which is good because it's coming in the concept of charity. Okay, we'll stop here. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to address. Any questions?